Yeah.
Okay. Good morning. This is Paul Ricci. I'm here with Natalie Bencivenga from, let's say, well, I guess you run your own media company.
Productions. I'm an independent journalist based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Okay, yes, we go way back.
We do.
And yes, certainly she's very prominent in the Pittsburgh media scene. We're here to discuss the closure of the Pittsburgh Post Gazette after almost 240 years.
Hmm.
Um, so I just think so, yes, and you used to work there.
Yeah, so I was there for 6 years from 2014 to the spring of 2020, and I was the scene editor and the Ask Natalie advice columnist, and I did a lot. I did video content. We had a show that was nominated for an Emmy called Setting the Scene, and I covered all of the different events and community happenings around the city with a focus on nonprofits. So it was an incredible job. It was very forward facing. I was out all the time and I was really able to build up a presence and a personality in the media scene. And I really credit the Pittsburgh Post Gazette to sort of giving me my breakthrough moment and space here in Pittsburgh to be able to have influence in a lot of the different areas of interest that I've now moved into as I moved forward doing my own work.
Okay, and so did you leave the Post Gazette? Was that before they went on strike? I know they were on strike for a long time.
Yeah, they've been on strike for 3 years, which was, I believe, the longest running strike in the history of the nation. And it finalized just a few months ago, and people were able to come back to work, those that were still on strike. And so they went on strike in this fall of 2022. I left in the spring of 2020. But, Paul, when I left, there were already rumblings of a strike. There was a lot of conversation about management and the harm that management was causing to the newsroom. So I was not surprised when they went on strike a few years
Hmm.
later.
Yeah, I never thought I'd be talking about Pittsburgh as a potential news desert. I mean, they lost the city paper as well.
Yeah, the Block Communications company, the parent company, had bought the city paper a few years prior and owned it and closed it without much fanfare on December 31st was their last day of 2025 in publication. And I think it was probably a shock to the most people at the city paper. So to lose such an institution that had been around for 35 years, like the city paper, which was really our alt daily, to now losing, or excuse me, an alt weekly, to now losing our daily paper, or what was left of it, the Pittsburgh Post Gazette, is such a travesty and is going to cause, I believe, so much harm to the community because we will not have a paper of record. We will not be holding people accountable in public positions, in corporations. There will be little oversight onto a lot of the things that are happening, especially with the new data centers being proposed and some being built, with the presence of ICE in our communities, with the new mayoral administration, who's going to be the watchdog for all of these spaces, and
Yeah.
in general, who's
Mhm.
going to be, you know, taking the record of the city, the second largest city in the state of Pennsylvania. So I think it's extremely sad what has happened.
Yeah, well, I guess there is the Tribune Review, but that's a lot more right-leaning.
Yeah, and the Trib isn't really based in the city anymore. So they don't have as much of a foothold in the Pittsburgh news scene. And they've shrunk over the years too. So I think for a city this size to not have a paper based in the city is really concerning.
So I guess that means that I guess I guess maybe it may be more important to move towards, say, more nonprofit models of newspaper and news media.
So that's a great point. There's so many different models that people are proposing as we're into this new landscape, and public source, which more functions on that model, more or less. They're an incredible news organization. I work with them closely a lot of times with my independent work, do a lot of collaborations and crossover work, but they're not a they're not a daily. They're more investigative. They do long form pieces, and they're a small newsroom. So I
Mhm.
think there's still going to be this big void that everyone is going to feel, and not just for all of the hard hitting news, but for the arts, for the culture, for the music scene.
And
It's going to be
sports,
very
of
hard to
course.
the sports. There's going to be so much missing, especially with the NFL draft and everything. It seems like this is all just a very unnerving time for this to happen, especially with the fragility of our democracy at this moment.
Yes, and well, right now, Allegheny independent media, yes, we are trying to fill the void, like it
Hmm.
out in more, I guess you could say, more the hinterlands of the
Uh-huh.
Alleghenies.
Yeah.
And, like looking at what's going out here. I mean, Wes, well, we do cover events in Pittsburgh. We did
Mm-hmm.
go to Newsapalooza.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think all of
And
that's important. I think myself being an independent journalist and trying to bring attention to issues that are flying under the radar or amplifying some of the work that the wonderful journalists around the city and around the country are doing is really important. Doing my own work. I work with WQED on a show about the importance of immigrants. I do a show for Penn Capital Star based in Harrisburg, a news roundup every week to bring attention to articles and things and issues. But um, it doesn't replace a newsroom that had 100 plus people, and I think being a
no,
part of such a newsroom that was even more robust 10 years ago, much more robust, and to see the steady decline of it is really, I blame the management and I blame the culture of how we're all receiving news and the vastly and rapidly changing landscape of media. There's a lot of places where we could grow into, but to just close the paper instead of trying to sell it, at least they're not being very loud if they had tried to sell it and couldn't sell it, or just the fact that they're doing this in this moment and not trying to adapt their model to the ways in which other people are trying and other organizations have been trying to adapt their models. It just seems very short-sighted. I could understand maybe the Block family doesn't want to own the paper anymore, but there should have been a community conversation because to me, the Pittsburgh Post Gazette
yeah.
or the legacy of the Gazette is bigger than any one owner, right? In a lot of ways, it belongs to all of us, even though we may not write the checks at the end of the day, but there's got to be some way
Mhm.
to save it or to at least save local journalism. And so,
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
with all the journalists that are going to be out of work,
yeah,
and
at least 100 people, if not more, because of the Teamsters and other people that work in that space that help put out the paper, etc. So it'll be over 100 people more than.
okay, yeah, I mean, I know, yes, Andrew Conti, yes, he's been, trying to create new models, media models with his Center for Media Innovation, and yes, we will be interviewing him for this piece as well.
Yeah, I think Point Park has done a great job trying to bring light to this attention. I work with Duquesne University. They have a center for journalism and media in ethics and integrity. I screwed that up because they've recently changed the name. But we're working on a Keystone uh, local news coalition to try to help bring people together um, to do more in the space of local news awareness, education, get people engaged with their policymakers, with their law legislatures, to help bring light to how we can create a place for journalism in Pennsylvania. So I think all of the institutions need to be working together. Chatham does a great job with student media. I think all of these spaces have to kind of be talking to each other um, and trying to figure out how can we work with foundations, how can we work with thought leaders, how can we work with independent journalists, with legacy media journalists like those at the Post Gazette, and find a way forward here because it's going to take all of us talking to one another and being a part of something bigger than ourselves and working towards a common good because journalism really is a part of that common good.
Yeah. I know they do have the Pittsburgh Media Partnership,
Yeah.
and yes, and obviously, I mean, we're not part of that because I guess we're not based in Pittsburgh,
Hmm. Shame.
but but obviously, I mean, trying to find other outlets or trying to get into rural areas, I thought our paper, the Tribune Democrat, would go under before the Pittsburgh Post Gazette would.
Yeah, it's just interesting to see this all transpire, and it's heartbreaking, but also I believe there might be an opportunity here to build something
So,
bigger and hopefully stronger. But it's going to take a lot of effort and will and collaboration and resources. So I think it's going to be an all hands on deck situation. And I hope the table is big enough for many voices to come together and talk about what the future of news could look like in Pittsburgh.
mhm. Okay, so getting back to, I guess so, like, are there a lot of ice raids in Pittsburgh, do you know?
So there have been several ice raids in the surrounding area. We've even seen them in areas like Beachview, Mount Washington. They're in the north right now. I think there was a raid in Cranberry not that long ago. They're all over. I've heard rumblings in Lawrenceville. It's a very scary time here in this region. It's a very scary time around the nation. We have, I think, one of the largest detention centers right now for detainees, people who are being kidnapped off the street. It's called Moshannon. I believe it's up in the middle of the state near
I
Penn
think
State
I think
University.
Phillipsburg.
Phillipsburg, thank you. So I find all of this extremely concerning as a citizen, as a journalist, as a person who has many friends of different backgrounds. And that's part of the work that I'm doing with WQED is to remind everyone that we are, all from different parts of the world. We've all been
Hmm.
here. Our families came here. Our ancestors came here from different parts of the world for different reasons, some by force, of course. Um,
Yeah.
and unless you're indigenous to this land, you too can trace your roots to other parts of the world. And so we should be embracing one another, accepting one
Hmm.
another. And so my show, Destination with Natalie Bencivenga, is looking at the different neighborhoods across the city and talking about the immigration history and where it has led, and looking at the changing communities. And I'll actually be doing Lawrenceville next. I've done uh, Bloomfield, Beachview, Carnegie, Squirrel Hill, and next up is Lawrenceville. So please stay tuned for that. That should be dropping this spring, and you can watch the rest of them at WQED's website or on their YouTube page.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's all exciting. So,
Yeah.
and okay, I guess getting back to it, I mean, obviously the Corporation for Public Broadcasting that dissolved.
Well, it didn't technically dissolve. There's parts that was a little bit of a misleading headline when they shared that, but they are still there. They still have the lights on, but they're hurting. And many of the divisions around the country have had to close. Luckily, not WQED, but it's a scary time for public media, and it's a scary time here in Pittsburgh for WQED. They've been very open and very vocal about their struggles right now, and that's why they are working with more independent creators to help broaden their reach while they're dealing with
Hmm.
more limited resources. So I think it's
Yeah.
important if you have a local media outlet like your local NPR channel or your local PBS channel, local media in general, independent journalists that you like to
Hmm.
follow, feel free to support, because we're all going to have to chip in and do whatever we can to keep the lights on until we can
Yeah.
figure things out with our leadership, because right now we're basically just being led into the jaws of fascism, and I don't believe that's where the majority of this country wants to go.
I agree. So I do know that like WPSU in the central part of Pennsylvania, they got taken over by WHYY in Philly,
Hmm.
because
Yeah,
of funding issues and
exactly. So things are continuing to merge and consolidate. We're losing a lot
mhm,
of, independent outlets. We're losing a lot of small outlets, and um, important work is being done at these little spaces. I think sometimes we forget, a small newsroom can be just as mighty and important as a very large outlet. And so I think we need to be encouraging all of these spaces to thrive in whatever ways that they can to continue to produce, you know, factual, informative, you know, supportive quality news that showcases their communities in all its facets, because we know that when we have more watchdogs, there is more accountability to those in power. And
Hmm.
that's the other thing that very
Yeah.
much concerns me is we know when there's news deserts, there's more corruption at the local level. And of
Mhm.
course, that trickles upward to
Yes.
the national as well.
Yeah. I mean, well, I guess so. I mean, it can also be an issue with media, that sometimes even before all this happened, like sometimes like for-profit media, sometimes, they have to kill a story because they're, because they don't want to offend their advertisers, or there's certain
Right.
stories they can't report, or even in public media not wanting to offend their corporate underwriters.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a mixed bag, right? Because you can use a subscription model where individuals can help prop up your newsroom, but I think costs are high to do anything. So you do need to find ways to have sponsorships, sponsor content, ads. But, when I worked at the Post Gazette, the ad department and editorial were like completely separate. One did not talk to the other, and once in a while, I'm sure an advertiser was upset, but that's why you had people that led the newsroom that could handle those calls and remind them that the work that's being done is being done in the interest of the community. And so there needs to be those boundaries set and those expectations set. I think that's just the way to do this ethically. Even when I do sponsored content with a partner in media, and I have somebody that wants to provide me sponsorship, I'm always very clear in the article, like, that this was a partnership piece, but the thoughts that are expressed below are my soul and mine solely. They do not reflect those of the advertisers. So there's a lot of ways to still work with one another, but be very clear about boundaries at this point. But at the end of the day, the advertisers do need the outlets because they need that visibility. So one hand does wash the other, and then the outlets need the advertisers because they need revenue. So I
Mhm.
think we're seeing more creative ways to model media, and I think subscriptions are part of that. But I think there's going to be a lot of different creative things we're going to see and have been seeing over the last several years to help figure out a way forward as this landscape becomes more crowded with independent journalists and content creators, which I put in their own category. Um, and we have to be careful that we're still adhering to good ethical practices, good fact-based practices, even when we're just a newsroom of one or two or five.
Well, certainly, yes. Right now, we may have a newsroom of about two people, and we do have a board, and we're
Yeah,
in the process of applying for 501(c)(3) status. So, I
that's
mean,
awesome. That's awesome, Paul.
so
It's,
yeah, we're
yeah,
supported by a grant from the Leveler Foundation, and yes, eventually we would like to expand. I mean, like I said, we do cover, Pittsburgh is in Allegheny County, so we will cover things going on there as well.
yeah,
We're near
absolutely.
there.
That's wonderful. Well,
Okay.
I appreciate the opportunity being able to connect with you again. We've known each other
Yes.
a really long time in the
Yes.
social justice space,
Back to healthcare for all PA when I was
which we're
doing the
still fighting
blogging.
for.
Yes. Yes.
And I was handling their
It's still
comms.
and it was an uphill battle, but
I think we're
yes, I
starting to
do.
turn a corner on that. So we'll have to touch base about healthcare for all on another conversation for sure.
Certainly, I do have interviews with Molly Rush and Chuck Panacchio. You're welcome to look at on
I
this
would love
website.
to. Thank you so much for the offer. I will. I love Molly. She's such a legend. So thank you for
Yes.
your work in that space and continuing to shed light on important topics with what you're doing. And I appreciate you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And all right, I'm going to stop recording.